Chapter 1. The Body Under the Tree. I have lived my entire life in Villa Selva, a coastal town tucked between olive hills and lemon groves in southern Italy. I have baptized its children, married its lovers, and buried its dead. But nothing prepared me for the day I found the mayor's body beneath the old fig tree in our church courtyard. It was a blazing summer afternoon, the kind that made the stone walls sweat and the birds fall silent. I was inside the sacristy, rereading the Sunday Gospel, when a loud crack split the silence. It wasn't thunder, it was sharper, like the sound of a branch snapping, or as I would soon learn, a gunshot. I rushed outside. There, beneath the shade of the fig tree, planted, legend has it, by Saint Sebastian himself centuries ago, lay Mayor Enzo Bellini. His body slumped forward, one hand curled around a wooden rosary, his white linen shirt blooming with a deep red stain. Enzo, the man everyone in town called a pillar. Enzo, the benefactor of our school, the host of every feast day, the man with a handshake for every shopkeeper and a smile for every child. But also, Enzo, the manipulator, the deal-maker, the man with too many secrets. By the time the police arrived, the town had gathered. Whispers spread like fire among the crowd. No one cried. No one screamed. They just stared. The fig tree, its broad leaves casting dappled shadows on the cobblestones, bore silent witness to it all. Murder beneath the fig tree. Father Matteo, the parish priest of Villa Selva. Chapter 1. The crack of midday. The day Enzo Bellini died, the sun bore down like a judgment. The coastal wind had stilled, and the heat pressed on the clay rooftops of Villa Selva like a great unseen hand. The birds, usually so noisy around noon, were eerily silent. Inside the sacristy, I was preparing my sermon for the feast of St. Elijah. My fingers turned the pages of the gospel, but my mind wandered. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of something approaching. Then it came, a sharp crack, loud and final, like the shattering of a ceramic chalice on stone. I froze. Outside, a scream. I ran, my old legs protesting with every step, and found myself beneath the fig tree. The oldest in town, it arched protectively over the courtyard, its massive limbs casting dancing shadows. And there he was, Mayor Enzo Bellini, face down in a pool of blood, the rosary beads twisted around his lifeless fingers. One cheek rested on the sun-warmed stone. His white shirt was soaked through, blooming red at the chest. Someone had shot him at point-blank range. Chapter 2. The Saint of Shadows. News spreads fast in small towns, faster still when it concerns a man as polarizing as Enzo. By the time the Carabinieri arrived, half the village had gathered behind the low stone walls, murmuring like bees. Enzo had always divided Villa Selva. To some, he was the generous patriarch, a visionary. He funded the new library, expanded the port, brought tourists and euros to our forgotten corner of Italy. To others, those whose land was seized, whose traditions were trampled, he was a wolf in silk. Standing amidst the shocked murmurs, I noticed the eyes that did not blink, the lips that did not tremble. Clara, Luca, Sister Bianca, Donato, 4 souls, 4 stories, all woven into the roots of that cursed tree. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Doubt. That evening, I could not sleep. The courtyard had been cleared, the blood scrubbed away, but a stain remained on the soul of the town. The fig tree loomed outside my window, casting fingers of shadow across the tiles. I sat at my desk, the rosary sliding through my fingers. My mind returned to the look on Clara's face, too composed, and Luca's clenched jaw. Donato's absence, Sister Bianca's silence. Each detail sat heavily like stones in a basket. I opened my journal. I had once promised myself never to become a chronicler of crime. But something within urged me. If not to bring justice, then at least to record the truth. The truth, I feared, would not be kind. Chapter 4. The young widow Clara Bellini appeared at my doorstep the next morning, just after dawn. Her dress was wrinkled, her eyes bloodshot, yet she held herself with strange resolve. "Father," she said, her voice tight, "may I come in?" I nodded and led her into the garden. We sat beneath the olive tree. She did not touch the tea I offered. "I didn't kill him," she said. I said nothing. "But I hated him, Matteo. I did, and I'm not ashamed to say it." She told me about the last 2 years, how Enzo had grown paranoid, controlling, how he tracked her movements, read her emails, followed her to the market, how he blamed her for his failures. He thought everyone was out to betray him, even me, especially me. Tears welled but did not fall. I know how it looks, but I didn't pull the trigger. I believed her, and yet I wasn't sure, because people lie, especially when they're trying to protect someone. Chapter 5. The Journalist. Luca Ferretti barged into the church later that day. He was unshaven, eyes red with rage or grief, maybe both. He had it coming, Luca spat. Everyone's acting like some saint died. He was bleeding this town dry. Sit down, Luca. He didn't. I wanted to expose him. Not this. This wasn't justice. It was chaos. I watched him carefully. Were you there, Luca? I was. Not when it happened. Before. I went to confront him. We argued. He laughed in my face, Father. Called me a boy playing with ink. I left, alive. He didn't. His voice cracked. For a moment, he looked like a child again. I didn't kill him, but I don't know if I'm sorry he's gone. Chapter 6. The Nun Who Wept. Sister Bianca always moved like a shadow through the village. Quiet, deliberate, never hurried. She had served the orphanage and the church for over 40 years, and I had never once seen her openly weep. Until now. She stood in the pews long after evening mass had ended, her back to me, hands clasped tight, her veil trembling with each breath. Sister? She didn't turn. You knew, didn't you? She said softly. Knew what? That he had no soul left to save. We sat in silence on the worn bench. I prayed for him, Father. Every day, even when he bulldozed our garden, even when he called our children a burden, I still prayed. But something changed. He came to me the day before he died. Wanted to donate a plaque for the new dormitory, to make himself look merciful, but he made me sign away the last olive terrace. I think he wanted redemption or control. I'm not sure anymore. Her voice broke. I couldn't stop him, and I hated him for it. I laid a hand over hers. She did not move. But I didn't kill him, Father. I only wished him dead. Is that enough to damn me? I had no answer. Because sometimes, wishing is the seed, and someone else carries the blade. Chapter 7. The Absent Baker. The bell above the bakery door jangled for the first time in days. The scent of warm focaccia drifted out into the square, but it wasn't comforting. It felt like a hollow gesture, a mechanical return to routine after violence. Donato Rossi stood behind the counter, his apron stained and his eyes shadowed by more than flour. He smiled at each customer, but the corners of his mouth barely lifted. When the last customer left, I stepped inside. He looked up, startled. Father Matteo, I thought I'd stop in for a loaf, I said. He reached for a fresh round and wrapped it quickly. His hands, once steady and graceful, fumbled slightly. You've not been to Mass, I said. I wasn't ready. He avoided my gaze. I understand, I said, and then, you passed the church that day. He froze. I did. 3 times. He placed the bread on the counter but said nothing. Elvira saw you. His jaw tightened. He picked at a fray in his apron string. I didn't kill him, Father. No one said you did. But you're thinking it. He sighed, his voice brittle. He destroyed everything my father built, took our land with a signature and a smirk. Did you confront him? Donato nodded slowly. I asked him to stop the development, told him we'd fight. He laughed, said I could bake bricks with my flour for all he cared. And I walked away, that's all. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. I left with the bread, but not with peace. Chapter 8. The Fig Tree Listens. Nana Elvira was in her usual place under the fig tree, her needles clacking, her lap heavy with wool. She didn't look up when I approached. They all speak to you, she said, but none of them realize the fig tree listens too. Elvira. Donato walked past 3 times. He never does that. Sister Bianca cried when she left the chapel the night before. And Clara, she sat in her car for hours, whispering with that journalist boy. She stopped knitting and looked up, her eyes clouded but sharp. You want truth, Padre? Stop asking who hated Enzo. Ask who feared him. I sat beside her on the old stone bench. The fig leaves whispered overhead. Elvira, do you know something? I know people. I've watched them change over years. Enzo made them afraid. He made them feel powerless. She resumed knitting. And someone, she added softly, finally did something about it. Chapter 9. The confession box. The confessional smelled of wax and old cedar. I had sat behind that screen for over 50 years, listening to sins of lust, anger, envy, and sometimes despair. That morning, someone entered silently during lauds. Father, came a voice I knew. Luca, you may speak. I told you I left before it happened, but that's not the full truth. I held my breath. I saw Clara. She was crying. There was a bruise on her wrist. She told me not to say anything, said Enzo would destroy her family if I did. And I waited, near the vestry. I don't know why. I saw Donato come later. He looked off, pale, nervous. I couldn't hear their voices. I left just before the shot. Why keep this to yourself? Because I thought Clara had done it, and I didn't want her to go down alone. His breath hitched. What should I do, Father? Truth must come into the light, I said, even when it shames us, even when it hurts. He left without saying another word. And I remained there, surrounded by shadows, waiting for morning to break through the fig leaves. Chapter 10. A visitor after Vespers. It was just after Vespers when I heard the heavy knock at the rectory door. 3 slow raps, deliberate and unfamiliar. Most villagers would never knock like that. They would call out or slip a note through the side slot. I opened the door to a man I did not recognize. He wore a pale linen suit and dark glasses, though the sun had long dipped below the rooftops. His shoes were polished, foreign, his face angular and stern. "Good evening, Padre Matteo," he said with perfect Italian tinged by a northern accent. "Might I have a word?" I stepped aside and motioned him in. He refused the seat and stood near the window, gazing out into the courtyard, his gaze fixed on the fig tree. "You knew him well, I believe?" he asked. "If you mean Mayor Bellini, yes, as well as anyone could. Then you know he was a man of many dealings. That is a mild way of putting it." He turned back to me, removing his glasses. His eyes were pale blue and cold. "My name is Arturo Dell'Aria. I'm an auditor for the Ministry of Infrastructure. Enzo Bellini was under quiet investigation." I remained silent. Corruption, fraud, embezzlement, but something darker too, coercion. He had files on people in this town, pressured them into silence, loyalty, or disappearance. I felt a chill settle into the room. "Did you find these files?" Arturo shook his head. "No, that's why I'm here. We believe the key to them lies somewhere in this village, possibly hidden by someone who didn't want them found." His eyes locked on mine. "If you hear anything, Father, consider the cost of silence, not just spiritual, but national." He handed me a card and turned to leave. As the door clicked shut, I stared at the card in my hand. For the first time since the murder, I felt something larger looming behind it, something that reached beyond our fig tree and our sunlit coast, something that might consume us all if not stopped. In the distance, a dog barked once, and somewhere under the fig tree, a secret remained buried. Chapter 11. A Key Among Thorns. Nonna Elvira rarely rose from her bench beneath the fig tree, but this morning she moved with purpose. The municipal gardeners had trimmed the hedges, disturbing the lower roots of the fig, and something glinted where earth met stone. She bent slowly, brushed aside a clutch of dry leaves, and pulled up a rusted object, small, oval, sharp-edged, a key, unusual, modern, and buried just deep enough to be hidden, but not forgotten. She said nothing to anyone. Instead, she wrapped it in a handkerchief, placed it in the basket beneath her yarn, and resumed knitting. I found her there that afternoon. Her needles clicked with less rhythm than usual. "Elvira," I said, "you've seen something." She didn't look up. "No, Father, I've found something." Her hand slipped under the yarn. She passed me the key. "He dropped it, the morning after." "Who? I don't know, but he stood there, right under the tree, didn't see me, or maybe he did." He knelt for a moment, then walked away fast. That key was not there the day before. I examined it. The teeth were sharp, newer than expected. On the head was a faint engraving, AR.2.07. Elvira watched me with her cloudy eyes. "Someone hid something, Father, and I don't think it was sin." Chapter 12. The Locked Room. The rectory attic had not been opened in years, but it held what the village no longer wanted: old donation boxes, war medals, broken chalices, and the file cabinets gifted by Enzo himself 10 years ago. One drawer was locked. I had never opened it. I climbed the ladder that night, the key Elvira had found gripped tightly in my hand. It slid into the lock with a soft click. Inside were folders, dozens of them. Manila, unmarked except by initials: CB, LF, BR, DR, Clara Bellini, Luca Ferretti, Bianca Rosa, Donato Rossi, and many more. People of Villa Selva, all labeled, catalogued, tabbed with dates and scanned photos. In Enzo's precise handwriting, pressure points, leverage, insurance. I turned page after page, documents about affairs, debts, secret paternity cases, land disputes, even police reports long thought buried. The mayor hadn't just ruled the town, he had collected it, piece by piece, through shame and silence. Then I found the last folder. My name, Matteo D., I hesitated. My heart pounded. I opened it, empty, except for one handwritten line, the only one I could never bend. Chapter 13. The Baker's Hands. I visited Donato at dusk. His bakery was empty save for the smell of scorched crust and salt. He looked older than a week ago, tired in a way that spoke of guilt, not grief. "I found the file," I said quietly. He looked up, startled. "In Enzo's drawer, you had a folder." I figured. "What did he have on you?" Donato looked away. "My brother, years ago, drugs, a bad scene in Bari. I paid Enzo to make it vanish, and he kept me on a leash ever since." His hands trembled. He folded them in front of him on the counter. "I wanted to kill him, Matteo. I went there that morning to tell him I was done, that I wouldn't pay again." "What did he say?" "He said he'd release the file, ruin my family, my brother's wife, the bakery, everything." His voice broke. "So I left. I didn't shoot him, but I wanted someone too." I placed a hand on his. "Someone did. I know, and that's the part that scares me." Chapter 14. Ashes in the Font. It began with a smell. The incense had not yet been lit for morning prayers, yet there was a scorched tang in the air, faint but unmistakable. I entered the sanctuary and felt it immediately. Something was wrong. At first, nothing looked amiss. The pews were still, sunlight streamed through the stained glass, and the fig leaves outside rustled softly in the breeze. Then I reached the baptismal font. Inside, the water was blackened, oily. Floating within it were the ashes of burned paper, some still curling at the edges. I reached in carefully and retrieved the remnants. They crumbled in my hands. A partially burned slip bore the letters B.R., Bianca Rosa. I checked the vestry. The small cabinet where I had hidden the files from Enzo's drawer had been opened. One folder was missing. I locked the church and went directly to the convent. Sister Bianca met me in the garden. She was calm, serene. "I had to," she said before I could speak. "If those documents ever saw light, they would destroy more than just names. They'd unravel faith." "You stole them?" "I took only mine and burned it. My sins are mine to answer for, Father, not Enzo's to exploit." I wanted to be angry, but I wasn't. Not yet. "What did he have on you, sister?" She looked away. "There was a girl, years ago, one I failed, and a letter I wrote, asking Enzo for help. He kept it, threatened to make it public if I opposed his plans again." Her voice dropped. "So I burned it. I burned her memory with it. May God forgive me." Behind us, the bell tolled once, noon, and I realized with dawning dread, if Sister Bianca could not bear her own truth exposed, what might someone else be willing to do to keep theirs buried? Chapter 15. The Fingerprint. It was Officer DeLuca who found it. The morning after the fire in the font, he arrived at the church with a dusting kit and a grim expression. The news of the burned document had traveled quickly, and now even the police seemed more invested in the case, perhaps realizing it was no longer just about a single murder. "You said the cabinet had been tampered with?" he asked, kneeling beside it. "Yes, only one folder was missing, but the lock wasn't broken. It was picked or opened by someone who knew how." He nodded and dusted the surface carefully. A few minutes later he straightened, holding a clear strip of adhesive film, a fingerprint. "It's too clean to be old," he said. "Let's see who it belongs to." I felt a coldness settle in my chest. By sunset the match came in. Not Sister Bianca, not Donato, not Clara or Luca. The print belonged to someone who, until now, had stayed entirely in the background. Nico Santoro, the sacristan. The quiet young man who lit candles before Mass, swept the floors and rang the bell at funerals, orphaned young, raised by the parish, invisible to most. But not, it seemed, to Enzo. Chapter 16. The sacristan's secret. I found Nico in the bell tower. He was winding the old brass mechanism, the gears creaking with each turn. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching motes of dust that floated like ancient ghosts. "Nico," I said gently. He didn't turn. "You know, Father," he said quietly, "I used to think this tower was the safest place in the world. I'd come here when the orphanage felt too loud, when I was scared, when he came to visit." He let go of the handle. The bell gave a soft groan. "You mean Enzo?" A slow nod. "He sponsored my schooling, paid for my apprenticeship. Everyone thought he was being generous, but he always wanted something back." I stepped closer. "What did he ask of you?" Nico's voice was low, his fingers curled around the railing. "Information. He'd make me listen. Watch. He said it was my duty, that I owed him. He'd remind me how he kept my file sealed, how he paid off the debt my mother left behind." What debt? My mother borrowed money from people she shouldn't have. Enzo paid it off, then used it to own me. I let the silence stretch between us. Then, did you kill him, Nico? He turned. His face was pale but clear. No, but I wanted to. I opened the cabinet because I thought if I destroyed the files it would all end, but I couldn't do it. Not all of it. I took one. Mine. That's all. And the rest? I left them, Father. I swear. I believed him, but someone else hadn't been as merciful. Chapter 17. The Whisper in the Crypt. The crypt beneath the church was older than the chapel itself, damp, narrow, filled with saints and dust. Few visited it now, fewer still lingered. But I had come seeking silence. It was nearly dusk when I descended with only a lantern and my prayers. The stone steps creaked under my weight. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten incense. I paused at the corner where the tomb of St. Aurelio rested, its carving softened by centuries. That's when I heard it. A voice. Low, urgent, not a prayer. You said it was done. A second voice, female, angry, and I told you it got out of hand. I held my breath, retreating behind the archway. If anyone finds the second file, we're finished. Then we make sure they don't. Silence followed. Then quick steps. A flick of shadow crossed the lantern's light. I didn't move. When I emerged, the crypt was empty. But I knew that voice, Clara Bellini, and she hadn't been speaking to Luca. That voice had been older, colder, practiced in deception. It belonged to someone I hadn't suspected at all. Someone still in power. The final piece had shifted. The last mask was slipping, and I was suddenly afraid. For the town, for the truth, and for myself. Chapter 18. The Last Testament. The next morning, I received an envelope. No sender, no seal. Just my name, written in a hand I hadn't seen in over a decade. Inside was a letter. No, a will. Folded carefully, yellowed around the edges. The ink faded but still legible. It was dated 7 years ago. The testament of Giulio Ferrante, the previous mayor of Villa Selva. My hands trembled as I read it. It stated clearly, irrevocably, that upon his death, the office of mayor and stewardship of several key town properties were to be entrusted not to Enzo Bellini, as had occurred, but to the town council. Jointly, democratically, it was signed, witnessed, and stamped. Enzo had forged a second document, one that appointed himself sole heir of Giulio's political legacy, and someone still loyal to Giulio, had kept the real testament hidden all this time. Until now. I sat back in my chair. The implications were staggering. Every decision Enzo made as mayor was not just controversial, they were illegal. Land seizures, project authorizations, budget reallocations. If this were made public, it would tear the town in two, reopen every wound Enzo ever inflicted. And yet, perhaps that was the only way forward. I folded the will carefully, locked it in my drawer, and prayed that I would have the strength to do what must come next. Chapter 19. When the bell tolls. The bell rang 12 times. Not for the hour, but for the man. Mayor Enzo Bellini's public memorial was held beneath the fig tree. It was his wish, or rather a political performance codified into his will. He wanted to be remembered, not in the halls of power, but beneath the roots of tradition. The townspeople gathered, dressed in solemn black, whispering in knots. Some cried. Others stood stiff with folded arms. Still others came for no reason but curiosity, hungry for the next twist in the town's unspooling mystery. I stood at the altar, barely listening to my own voice as I read the psalm. My eyes scanned the crowd. Clara stood near the front, her veil drawn low. Next to her, Luca stared blankly at the ground. Donato Rossi lingered at the back, arms crossed. Sister Bianca had brought children from the orphanage to sing a hymn, innocent voices piercing the charged air. And then there was him. Standing behind the last row, half in shadow, was Aldo Veretti, chairman of the town council, former deputy to Giulio Ferrante, quiet, efficient, always loyal. First to Giulio, then suspiciously quiet under Enzo. He wasn't mourning, he was watching. When the ceremony ended, mourners dispersed. I remained by the fig tree. That's when Clara approached me, her face pale, her hands trembling beneath her gloves. "Father," she whispered, "I think someone is following me." "Who?" She turned slightly, eyes darting toward the shadows. "Aldo. He's been watching me since the funeral planning. He knows about the will, doesn't he?" I said nothing. She pressed something into my hand, a flash drive. Enzo kept recordings, of meetings, conversations, blackmail. I found it hidden in the piano bench. I think Aldo's voice is on it. I closed my fingers around the tiny device, another truth, another burden. And the bell, which had fallen silent for now, seemed to echo in my bones. Chapter 21. The Arrest. It happened quietly. No sirens, no shouting, no dramatic confrontation beneath the fig tree, just two officers, a clipboard, and Aldo Veretti being led away from the council chambers in handcuffs. Officer De Luca looked grim as he handed me a sealed envelope. The prosecutor's office is preparing charges. At minimum, abuse of power, possibly more. I opened the envelope in my study. Inside was a typed report summarizing the findings from the recording. Aldo's threats, his financial connections to Enzo's shell companies, and a digital trail that hinted at knowledge, if not complicity, in several of the mayor's coercive schemes. But there was something else. A brief note from De Luca, handwritten. We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Aldo had motive, but no access to the murder weapon. We're missing something. And that's when I remembered the voice in the crypt. Clara had said too much, but Aldo hadn't spoken the final line that still haunted me. Then we make sure they don't. The we was what mattered now. Someone else had helped him. Someone who still walked free. The arrest brought silence to Villa Selva, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence of a breath held before confession, and I feared the next words spoken would break more than hearts. Chapter 22. A Mother's Prayer. It was well past Compline when I heard the side door of the church open. I had remained behind to pray, or perhaps to avoid sleep. So much had happened in so few days. My heart was heavy, my thoughts spiraling around half-truths and names whispered in the dark. The candlelight cast long shadows across the nave. I heard the soft click of heels and turned slowly from the altar. Clara Bellini stood just inside the doorway, a scarf drawn around her shoulders. She did not look like a widow mourning. She looked like a woman unraveling. She approached the side chapel where the Virgin's statue stood in marble grace. There she knelt. For several minutes she said nothing. She didn't even move. Only when I stepped near did I hear her voice, thin, wavering. I told myself it would end with Enzo, that once he was gone I could start again. She looked up at the Virgin's face. But I see now, it's not over. The truth is too heavy to bury. And I've been carrying it too long. I said nothing. She lit a candle. Its flame danced unsteady. I didn't kill him, Father, but I knew who would. Her fingers tightened over the pew rail. I helped Aldo find the gun. He told me it would never be used. Just a threat, a scare. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Her voice cracked. But when it happened, when Enzo was dead, I realized I'd been part of it. Not with blood, but with silence. I sat beside her. She wept quietly. In the flickering light, the statue of the Virgin looked down on her, not in judgment, but in sorrow. Chapter 20. The Weight of Mercy. Morning broke, gold and silent. I had not slept. Clara's confession echoed through my thoughts, not in accusation, but in sorrow. There was no doubt now. She had not pulled the trigger, but her hands were not clean. None of ours were. I knelt at the altar, asking God for guidance. Justice demands clarity. But mercy, I've found, lives in the murkier places, the moments between confession and consequence. By mid-morning, I stood outside Officer De Luca's door. The envelope in my hand held everything, the recording, the will, Clara's statement. I could hand it over. I could let the law decide. But I paused. A child passed by, holding a fresh loaf of bread from Donato's shop. Another waved from the orphanage window. The town, bruised and breathless, was healing in small ways. Would truth help them, or reopen wounds that hadn't finished bleeding? I turned away from the door. Later that afternoon, I met Clara at the fig tree. You didn't go to the police, she said quietly. No. Why? Because your son will need his mother, and because mercy is not weakness. She wept again. This time, not in guilt, but in gratitude. Justice may not come by gavel or prison bars, but truth, I believe, always finds its light, even beneath the shade of an old fig tree. Chapter 24. The fig tree bears witness. The fig tree stands still. Summer has waned, and its branches are heavier now, ripe with fruit, casting longer shadows across the stone courtyard. A breeze rustles its leaves, whispering secrets only time can translate. I sit on the old bench beside Elvira's empty seat. Her yarn basket remains untouched. Her needles rest atop it, mid-row, as though she had only stepped away. But she hadn't returned since the day of the funeral. Her health faded, and so did her voice. But not her memory. Before she passed, She left me a final note. In her careful, wavering script, she wrote, "What we carry in silence still echoes in the earth. You were right to listen, Matteo. The tree knows. Let it be." I often think of her words when the town feels too quiet, when the past stirs beneath the surface of the present. The files were destroyed. The recording never aired. Aldo remains behind bars, but the charge was for corruption, not murder. Clara raises her son, quiet and devout, attending Mass each week. Donato still bakes, though he smiles more rarely. Sister Bianca has retired. Luca left for Rome. And me, I remain here. I sweep the nave, I anoint the sick, I light the candles when no one else remembers to. But mostly, I sit under the fig tree. Because truth is not always loud. Sometimes it grows slowly, patiently, deep beneath the roots of a town like ours. And if you listen, truly listen, you may hear what lingers still. Not a confession, not a name. Just the soft echo of justice and mercy and the whisper of leaves overhead.